Welcome everyone to this week's Working Through It Wednesday. We are privileged to have Dr. Bob Stevens with us today. We're going to be doing a three-part series on tips, PDSAs, and then the crosswalk between. And Dr. Stevens is going to start us off today with discussing tips. So please, everyone, enjoy having Dr. Bob Stevens, the incredible, the wonderful, present for us today. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you so much, Taylor. I appreciate that. My name is Bob Stevens, and I have the great fun of being a consultant to a number of initiatives across the state of Carolina and the Southeast. That includes the AWARE initiative out of the Department of Education, the BASC initiative that Taylor's part of with the USC and the Department of Ed. Also, the initiative, which is an initiative for improving our networks, and that is from the Department of Mental Health, along with the Center for School Mental Health, and then also All for South Carolina, which is an initiative at University of South Carolina in some targeted school district. With me in this presentation, she's going to be presenting part two, is Dr. Margaret Merriweather from the South Carolina Department of Mental Health. So we're going to be talking today about team implemented problem solving. Now, team implemented problem solving comes from Pbis. Technical Assistance Center on Pbis out of the University of Oregon has helped develop with other folks this idea of team implemented problem solving. The second part of our presentation that Dr. Merriweather will be something called Plan, Do, Study, Act Cycle, which comes from the National Center for School Mental Health. These two approaches are similar to each other, and so what we want to do for the audience is to compare the two, talk about each one of them individually, and then we're going to go ahead and do a crosswalk. Part three will be a crosswalk talking about the two different approaches and how well they work together. These things, both the Plan, Do, Study, Act and team implemented problem solving, are critical school teams. In all of these initiatives that we've mentioned, BASC and AWARE and COIN, they all call, as we know, for school teams to do an excellent job with problem and figuring out how their schools forward. And so these are two approaches that really address the same thing, but do it in slightly different ways. Moving forward, I'm going to talk today a little bit about team implemented problem solving in more detail. And as we mentioned, it comes from the University of Oregon. The prime was done by Rob Horner, Steve Newton, and Ann Todd. Also, some folks out of the University of North Carolina at Charlotte spent a lot of time working on this, Bob and Kate Aglazine. So it's a time-honored, well-established approach for our school teams to be able to move forward, problem solve, and address the issues that take place in their schools around behavioral health. And that's what we're here for. Okay, so we need to remember what TIPS is all about, team implemented problem solving, and it's a process for using data to make decisions. And then it's also a structured meeting process by which we move those decisions we've made forward. How do we move forward and get things accomplished? Because we all know we sit in our teams and we can do a lot of talking, but we don't always accomplish what we want to accomplish. So starting out with the data piece of this, the problem solving and action planning piece of it, we know that in many of our school team approaches, we use this TQM model, this total quality improvement model. And TIPS uses a model just like that. You'll hear something similar when we talk about PDSAs, where we identify the problem, we develop a hypothesis, we come up with a solution. The solution then leads to an action plan. And the action plan, we see if it works or not, and we go back and adjust it, and we keep going around in the cycle. The key to the one with TIPS is, as you can see, exact middle, we really want to use data is the key. Tells us what we need to do if we've been successful. So this is really a key important part of this. Okay, moving forward, what kinds of things to look at to see if we have any problems? What are some of these problems? And you can see that we can look at trends that are going on in our schools, or we can look like about behavioral health. We can look like office referrals. And you'll see in this presentation the abbreviation, the acronym ODR, which stands for office referrals, office discipline referral. That's what ODR stands for. So you understand what that means when you see it. And these are some of the kinds of things that we can look at. The average number of what are the faculty and parents' opinions regarding the level of behavioral health in the school and so forth. Moving forward, one of the ways that we want to look at our data is to get very, very specific. And tips to use the 5 W's, very much like if we were taking a course in creative writing or in newspaper writing. We the 5 W's are who, what, where, why. And we try to answer those questions with our data. And if we can, then we can come up with a solvable problem statement. So here's the question: what problems or behaviors are occurring? For that one might be referral by problem behavior, or when is the problem occurring? When are these things occurring by time? So this is the kind of data we want to get very specific about what we need to do. I want to point out for a little bit the last one, the why, because one of the things I do on management and interventions within the classroom. And one of the things that we really don't think about enough, particularly our classroom teachers, are why the students are behaving the way they are, thinking about what the motivation is. So one of the great questions to ask when we're trying to determine and improve behavior is why things are occurring. What is motivating the student? Okay, so once we have what we want to do is to write a precision problem statement. Because if we have a general statement like, gee, this school is out of control, we have too many office discipline referrals. Well, that's interesting, but it really doesn't help us come up with a solution, does it? We have too much disrespect going on in the school. That really doesn't help us come up with a solution. So what we want to do is get more precise using that who, what, where, when, and why. So if we can look down on that second box on the left side, too many office discipline referrals between 1 and 1:30. That doesn't help us too much, but it is better. So now we can focus in what's going on between 1 and 1:30. We can talk about that. Gee, that's lunch hour, or that's when all of our students have a transition time, or we can start thinking about those kinds of things. And where you want to get to is, if you look down at the bottom right side, where we have a statement that is much more precise. We have a total of 12 aggression office discipline referrals on the playground last month, twice as many as last year, and we're showing an increasing trend. It occurs during first recess, and you know what? Those 12 discipline referrals come from 8 specific students that are showing aggression, and it looks like that getting their classmates' attention is what's causing the behavior. Have that kind of detail, now we can really come up with a great problem solving. We can address these 8 students. We can address what's going on at first recess, and we can try to do a number of different things. So here's another one. The 6th graders are disruptive and use inappropriate language in the cafeteria between 11:30 and 12 o'clock to get peer attention. Now we know we got to work with our 6th graders. We're going to work on using appropriate language, and we have a specific time that we want to do a lot of active supervision. So now we can address this. And so that's why we look at our data by who, what, where, when, and why. And then we come up with a solution, and we come up with a creative solution development. And in our school systems, our teams need to look at is what can we do to prevent this behavior from occurring. And so that goes back again to thinking about our function of behavior, our motivation. What do we need to do to teach the kids not to behave that way? If there's a problem in our school, and this is a teaching environment, we should always go first to teaching the students what they're supposed to do. And we forget that sometimes. We go right to punishment. And we need to remember our first response should always be teaching. Reward. We know to change behavior, we have to acknowledge the appropriate behavior. So are we doing enough to acknowledge the good behavior in these circumstances? And do we have a reward system or an acknowledgement system that will help our students understand what they're supposed to be doing? Extinction, this goes back to function of behavior. And then finally, corrective consequences. This is the consequence part. This is the discipline piece. And that we don't do that. If a student does something wrong, they have to have consequences. But if all we do is corrective consequences, we're never going to change the behavior. We also have to look at what we need to do to prevent. How can we reteach what they should be doing? How can we acknowledge students when they do it right? And then at the end, of course, you see the last and most important thing here is to collect our data so we know when we solve the problem. So often we see school teams implement some intervention in the school, and then they never go back to see if it was successful. They just do it all year, and at the end of the year, they're still having the same problem. Intervention that they implemented never changed anything. It never changed any of the data. So you have to go back and check afterwards. Okay, so remember, if we're going to have team implemented problem solving, we have to have an observable goal for decreasing the problem. What will it look like and sound like when the problem is resolved? How do we know if we've implemented our intervention appropriately? And then finally, when will we declare a victory here? What will the numbers look like when you declare a victory? Okay, so let's look a little bit about specifically who's going to do what we're going to do, and then how we're going to write this information down. Because if it isn't written down, it isn't occurring. This is one of the big problems we have with our team meetings. Quite often we will discuss problems, but it doesn't get written down in a problem-solving format. And if it's not written down, it isn't occurring. It has to be written down so it can be shared with the rest of the team, with the school, with the administration, with the interventionists within the school, whoever it might be. And so we have to write our solutions down. And so here we go. Here's our meeting foundations idea. Remember, one of our problems we have is that when we want to go from a problem to a solution, that to use our data. And this is what TIPS tells us to do. What often occurs in our team meetings is that we go all over the place. We talk about the problem, everybody starts throwing in their 2 cents worth, and we have our 30 or 40 or 50-minute meeting, and we never get around to getting to the solution. We just go out of town. And using data can help us focus on what the solution would be. So we don't want this crazy line all over the place. We want to have the direct line from the problem by using data to what we want to have as a solution. And the key to collective problem solving is to make sure that we show everybody on that team what we're trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish. And to do that, we will have a series of forms that we will use. And the neat thing about this form is you're going to be able to compare it later on with a very similar form that PDSAs use. This Pbis team meeting and problem solving, that's just an excellent tool to use, a visual context so everybody can see on the team what we're going to do. And when we have a team meeting, we have clearly specific agendas. As the team meeting is going on, some topics might come up that we want to use for the next meeting. So we have a place there to jot down information that we may want to talk about at the next time. We want to talk about what we're going to do, the information for the team, what the issue is. This is who, what, where, when, and why. What the data is, what the discussion we had about it is, and what we're going to do about it. Ms. Jones is going to come up with a reward system in the cafeteria. Who's going to do it? Ms. Jones is going to do it. When's it going to be done by? These are the specifics to any problem-solving tool that a team uses. What are we going to do? When we're going to do it by? Who's going to do it? Who's going to get it done? And then because we're TIPS, we also throw in this idea of looking at our data, the who, what, where, when, and why, and then coming up with our action solutions. What are we going to do to prevent it from occurring? How are we going to teach the students to address this? How are we going to acknowledge the appropriate behavior? And then if we have to use a consequence, what is the correction process that we're going to do? And again, who is going to do these things? When are they going to do them? And what is the goal? If we had 12 office referrals from the playground, is our goal to have 5 office referrals next week or the week after? What is our goal? What is acceptable? And what are we going to do? So this is the PBIS team meeting form. And the team would sit with this and complete this together. And again, the key factors here are what's going to be done, who's going to do it, when is it going to be done by, and when do we know it's been successful? And with tips, we learn to use our data to really fine tune, come up with these precise problem statements, very precise problem statements. So we're not just talking generically, very broad, and we don't get anything accomplished. Okay, and then when you're done, we can talk about the meeting. We can even rate our meetings, which is always a good thing to do. Did we have an effective meeting or not? If we didn't have an effective meeting, why not? So we know we don't fall into this problem next time. And that's that little rating box down at the bottom. Was it a good meeting? Was it a bad meeting? Or was it a so-so meeting? Okay, and so here's an example of using this where you can fill in the data. And this form we have blank. It's available to you to use. You can type it up during the meeting. That's the best way to do. Have somebody at the meeting who's actually typing it up. I like to use a projector, and we actually project this form during our meeting on the wall and type it up. And the LCD is a great tool, so everybody can see what we're doing. It is written down. It can then be shared with the administration. It can be shared with the interventionists if they're not in the meeting. And we all know who's going to do what and when it's going to be done by. So there's, again, a sample of what this meeting looks like. Okay. And so running back through this very quickly. Whoop, went too far with this. Hold on just a minute. And then we know where we place certain things. Where do we place our planning for our next meeting? There you go. What are we going to do about the students who need some support for literacy in this example? That's what we're going to do. How are we going to schedule for hallway monitoring for next month? And you can see there's a place to put everything in the next meeting report on lunchroom status. There's some examples. So this form can be used very easily to really plan and move your team forward. Okay, that concludes our very brief overview, and this is all it is an overview of what team implemented problem solving is. I'll go back to that so we're not on a blank screen. And what we're going to hear next is from Dr. Merriweather, and she's going to tell us about this. Tell us about the Pdsa cycle, which comes from the Center for School Mental Health. The TIPS implementing meeting that you just saw comes from out of the Center for Pbis out of the University of Oregon. And I hope it's shown you some good things that you can do in your team meeting. And once Dr. Merriweather presents on Pdsa, we're going to come back and we're going to compare the two. So thank you so much. Hope everyone's having a great day. And I'll turn the meeting back over to Taylor. Thank you, Taylor.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stevens. That was incredibly helpful and informative. And we look forward to having Dr. Merriweather share with us the information about PDSAs and then reconnecting with you over the crosswalk. For everyone that's joining us today, please complete our survey and tell us what you thought about the TIPS presentation. And we look forward to your feedback. So thank you so very much, everyone, and have a lovely day.